Talk to him, then I'll get him out of here, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I pulled
Who
up.
was the male party with Diana? Was it Mike Rice?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I pulled up. They were standing or stopped in the middle of the road, just screaming at each other. Couldn't make any sense of what anybody was saying. Told them to get back in their cars and separate.
Okay.
So he got back in his car. He pulled away. It's just verbal. I mean, they're
Okay.
sitting there screaming at each other. So
Okay. What did Diana or Mike say anything or?
just that they were coming up behind him, and he's, this whole neighbor dispute is going on, and they stopped. Diana and Mike stopped behind him, got out to yell at him.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right.
Cool. Thank you.
I remember what I said. My name is Joey Wade. I'm residing here in Oregon. And I just want to bring some awareness to a new act that's coming down that was introduced April of this year. Started off with the Violence Against Women's Act, which was quite a few years back. Violence Against Women's Act was to create financial support to address domestic violence through law enforcement, health service, outreach programs, and so on. Big funding call for to address escalating domestic violence. What followed up with that was the Tribal Law and Order Act, basically saying offering the tribal police force additional equipment, additional manpower, outreach advocates to address domestic violence. Well, this past April, Al Franken and Senator Tester, both of the U.S. Senate Indian Affairs, put out the Tribal Youth and Community Protection Act of 2016. Now, that act is legislation to extend criminal jurisdiction over non-tribal members for drugs, domestic violence against children and women, and crimes against tribal law enforcement. Now, a key here is going to extend criminal jurisdiction to the tribal courts. And that's a big concern. My past experiences with the tribal court, I will say, they do not have a defined procedure. Policy changes on the fly at any given moment. So with that, any fair justice is hard to reach within the tribal courts. And again, this is just to give awareness of these acts and how they're developing, and a request that you contact your local representatives, your district representatives on this act to ensure that some type of oversight, if the tribal courts are allowed to do criminal jurisdiction, that oversight at least has those tribal courts mirrored of county courts. Because what's occurring right here, right now, is the tribal court and the tribal police will use this as a tool to target people. It's being done to me right now within the tribal courts, and I'll give an example of that if I may. I'm only going to be a few more minutes here. Local, based on this, what is that? Criminal jurisdiction over non-tribal members against children. Local community member filed a bogus restraining order with Paul Day. Not a lick of evidence. Paul Day implemented a temporary restraining order that includes followed or pursued or stalked the petitioner, made uninvited visits to the petitioner, frightened the petitioner, took pictures of the petitioner. So basically with that, if my last experience with the tribal court, when I was summoned in, I gave a reply. I showed up for court. I wasn't even allowed to enter the court. After the court proceedings, third or fourth session, I was then called in to come and testify. I refused. Now, tribal court stated initially the reason for me not being allowed in was because the other party did not want me there. And then later on, when they called me in, they stated they had jurisdiction over me because I submitted a written reply to their summary. So it's a two-catch situation. If I were to respond to this petition, I would be submitting myself to their jurisdiction. And it's just total madness, the way the procedures and the policies are set up within the tribal court. There is no form of true justice there. South Dakota, if I'm not in error, just recently approved criminal jurisdiction for tribal courts. Marty Jacobs stated pretty much flat out, you will come in line with state and county court procedures, and whatever it takes for its training will help you get there. And if that same worldview is not applied to local, again, tribal police, tribal courts will utilize these federal acts that are coming down to target people, and people will not get true justice. And that's what my concern is, again, is just to bring awareness of this act that's coming down, and ask you guys to speak with your local representatives, your district representatives, because it's going to be an all-out season on a lot of good non-tribal members and tribal members. And those that speak up against the dysfunction of issues such as the Indian Child Welfare Act, you know, and on and on and on. They're going to be shut down right quick. They're going to be put in this tribal court on the criminal charges and then hauled into the lockup. And me as a non-tribal member, by choice, whether a tribal officer shows up or whether a county officer shows up underneath any of this dog and pony show, I have no other alternative but to put my hands out and say, take me in. It's going to get really ugly if some type of oversight is not placed on these upcoming, you know, criminal authority. That's basically all I had to express. If you have any questions, I'll give each and every one an email with my address, and I can give you, you know, verifiable, reliable information to include congressional daily correspondence. This goes all the way up to the top, right past Dayton, right to Mahajua, Department of Justice, the liaison of tribal communities, who walked out of England, leaving Sharia law in her wake. That's how serious this is. But at any rate, that's all I have to say. Do you have any questions?
Mr. Wade, if you could, just what was the name of the final bill that you referenced? I got two of them.
The current one that's being implemented is the Tribal Youth and Community Protection Act of 2016.
Did that pass?
No, it was just introduced in April 2016. Paul Day's already acting on it as a foundation. So, and that, as I mentioned, that restraining order, temporary, since I didn't reply to it, it's already active under their court. It's now a 2-year restraining order, and if this thing passes, if this law passes within 2 years, I can promise you they're going to be at my door. Wouldn't that go to me? Basically, because I refuse to quit addressing some of the extreme concerns in the community that are not being fixed by a lot of these federal policy funding that's coming down. It's being totally abused.
Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Wade, I'd just comment that the board, Cass County Board, State of Minnesota, and the tribe do have a law enforcement agreement that
Yes, sir.
defines the jurisdiction presently.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, we have a county board liaison committee, which is Commissioners Downham and Bruns. And
Understood.
we have a protocol on such things that if the committee wishes, we'll do some research and contact the tribe and find out what the status is.
Well, as far as my personal concerns, I'm not asking for any support, any help on any of that. I just utilize that as an example.
Yes, sir.
As to how things are unfolding right now. And again, the request is for, you know, any district representatives or local representatives of the decisions on up to the top that you can, you know, have a look into this more. Great.
We have a method of sharing that information.
And I do understand the mutual agreements and understanding, starting off with Eli hunting before up to the current date, and how it's developed itself over time. A lot of good work's been done. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, we'll do some research and report back to the board.
Yes, sir.
And I'd be glad to share that with you.
No response necessary, I don't believe. I kind of sit in the background, and it'll show up sooner or
You're in the
later.
newspaper now.
Excuse me. What about the newspaper?
Well, again, I appreciate the time.